welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And today, I have another special guest. Her name is Alex de la Garza. She is the Senior Manager of Mobility for Indeed. She is also certified with their GMS-T with the Worldwide ERC. And I also see that you are also a board member for Austin Relocation Council. And so I'm so excited to have you on the show. Hey, Alex.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, anytime I have a new guest on the show, I always start reflecting, like, when did I meet them or when did they come into my path? And for you, it was the North Texas Relocation Professionals Fall Conference, and you were one of the panelists on the Women in Leadership panel. And I just admired all of the ladies that were on the panel. But that was when we first met. What'd you think about that conference?
Yes, it was so good. I was honored to be there, and just great company and such admirable women in the industry to share the stage with. So yeah, it was really great.
You know, Meredith Morris, she facilitated that. And then Randy Wilson, she's the CEO for NEI, Elizabeth Stewart with Altair, and then Paige Holden with Zonex. I just thought, and then of course I just thought it was an incredible panel. And of course, the whole conference was great. So I really enjoyed that. Hey, I want to, as we get started into the show, I would love for you to share just kind of a brief highlight for those who don't know, and most people that listen to the show probably have heard of Indeed. Who is Indeed, and how do you serve your customers?
Sure. So Indeed is a company that's 11,000 employees now worldwide. We are headquartered in Austin, Texas, and it is a job website. So we help people get jobs. That's our mission. Many of our customers, they small business up to like enterprise businesses. So worldwide, we have websites that people and companies can post jobs to, and people can apply for them. My job is internal, so I work with Indeed employees worldwide as well.
Well, we're going to get into that because I know that you are really passionate about the world of mobility. And I want to get into that. I want to get into leadership. I want to get into a few things you mentioned at the conference as well. But before we do that, I would love to hear the Alex de la Garza story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into mobility and HR and talent?
By accident, like everyone else. So I am originally from Texas, and I'm from South Texas, from a little tiny town called Brownsville, Texas. It's actually on the border by the sea. So it is, if anybody's heard of South Padre Island, that is like the beach that's closest to me. It's about a 15-20 minute drive from where I grew up. And that is now also the site for SpaceX, actually. So we have got a launch pad on Boca Chica Beach, which is also right by where I grew up. So that's a good reference now. But back in the day, there was like nobody had ever heard of it. So yes. And like I said, border to Mexico. So kind of went back and forth to Mexico often. That's where I grew up.
Yeah. And by the way, Brownsville, Texas, real quick story on Brownsville, Texas. I'm part of Texas SHRM, and I get to speak at the different chapters around the great state of Texas. Brownsville, Texas is one that I spoke at in 2019. And yes, it is, but it's an incredible community. Lots of great people there in the community. And so I just really enjoyed my time there, but I did not know SpaceX was there. Interesting. Fun fact. So yeah, how did you get into mobility? I mean, did you even know what mobility was growing up?
No, of course not. I didn't know it was a thing. But actually, my first job out of college, I worked for a Remax broker, and I did marketing for her. She owned 3 Remax offices. And that was, my first job. I helped her out. I learned about real estate there. And then she got a big call from, I think it was Valero was moving to San Antonio at the time. And so she was asked to help with relocating a lot of their people to San Antonio because they were moving their headquarters. And so I just kind of got started there, and she asked me to help her with some of that. And we were working through a relocation. I think it was Remax Relocation. They did all of their relos on there. So I just kind of found out about that, and working with Valero's mobility manager at the time. And I just didn't know what that was. I'm like, this is really interesting. You just move people. So I loved that. And I just was really interested in that space after I learned that it was actually an industry and that was actually a job. I thought that was really exciting. So, because we did move people from around the world at that time. So
Well,
it started there.
yeah, and then I know you spent some time on the agency side, or a lot of people would say the vendor side, and now
Yes.
you're on the corporate side. I'm always fascinated by that, and I always would like to ask the question. So I'm going to ask you the question: what is it like to serve on the agency side or vendor side versus the corporate side? Like, what is the difference? What are some differences that you've kind of seen?
Yes. So I spent about 10 years working for a relocation management company, and it is very different. I knew that I also, from being in an RMC, I knew I wanted to go to the corporate side for sure. I said, that job is way easier. I really want to do that one. That was my first thought there. And then once I was given the opportunity to kind of come to the corporate side, I guess I could say that it was an awakening, because I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was so much. Basically all of the HR side of things. So I learned so much about HR and talent acquisition, and why we're doing what we're doing on this side. So there's a whole world of work that happens even before we engage the RMC. So it took me a long time to learn all of that, but it was an awakening, and it was kind of naive of me to think that it was going to be kind of an easy job. It was a lot to learn from there, but I love it. I think I want to stick to the corporate side of it. And so yeah, I've been here or on the corporate side since 2015.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I have to just ask this one question, because when someone uses the word love, I love this. I'm all in on that, because I really think when we find our lane, right, we just find joy in what we do. What is it that you love about the corporate side so much?
I agree with you. I think that you definitely, when you find something that you love, it's really amazing, because not everybody, has that or takes or finds it right away. But for me, for sure, I do love my job. I'm one of those people that was always like, I love Mondays, and like Friday, oh, that's tough, like what am I going to do since then? But I feel like it's just because you find what you're good at and how you can add a value to things. And so for me, it just makes me feel productive. It makes me feel like I'm adding something to my team, to someone else's life, like helping people out. Ultimately, moving is one of life's biggest stressors, and people are so appreciative when you can help them out in that way. So for me, I love the industry, but I also happen to love my company. Indeed is an amazing place to work at, and I feel very lucky to be here. And then I also have an amazing team that adds to that. So there's kind of all those factors. So I've just been really lucky in my job and my position to just share it with all the some great and really smart people.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. And I love how you used when we find a way to add value to other people or organizations, that's when we really get in alignment. Hey, I want to ask you this question, and that is, obviously you went to, you worked for a real estate company, then you're working for an RMC, and now you're in corporate. So you've kind of traveled that road. It seems to me like people that I've interviewed on Life in the Leadership Lane have this common thread, and that is they all have had mentors along the way. And I was just curious, have you had any mentors that have helped you get to where you are? And if you have, like, what was it about it that made them such a good mentor?
I've had multiple mentors, I think, and it's just without kind of calling them that official
Mm,
name, but I feel like you realize it kind of later, like they really did mentor me through. And I think the first step is just having somebody that you admire and that you respect, and just having them also respect your work and helping you out and guiding you through that and being honest. I think one of the main things that I would say kind of stands out with the mentors that I've had along the way is that direct feedback and honesty about, like, hey, you know what, you messed up, or this is how you can do things better, versus somebody who's just kind of careful and like that. So I've tried to kind of adopt that as well, but it's not an easy trait to find sometimes, I think, also early in your career. And you've got to treat feedback as a gift. And so sometimes I feel like when you're younger, you take things, you might not take things very openly, or might feel like it's a criticism. And it's, you've got to develop that, as well as just being able to listen to what people are telling you as feedback to improve, for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that so much. I love, by the way, I love you used admiration, respect, but even honesty. I think we have to be honest, like with ourselves and with others, to really get vulnerable. But you said feedback is a gift. And I got to say, I appreciate you sharing this, because I think there's a lot of listeners out there that would love to, like, I want to get better at that. I just have not been able to get better at that. And some of the things that you shared, but I was wanting to just kind of add on. How did it, like, did you have to like train yourself to do this? Did it just take you a while to get your mindset right? Or what was do you kind of, as you reflect, like, what was that process like?
It was definitely maturity and growing up, I think.
Mm,
I don't think it was easy for me in the very beginning. I was very tough on myself. And
mm,
because I was tough on myself, I thought there's no other thing that I'm not noticing that I could improve on. I knew kind of, I felt like I knew what my flaws were or what I needed to improve on, you know, being young. But I think with time, it's just more difficult to see your blind spots, but
yeah.
you also realize that it is more difficult to see your blind spots, and you become more open. Or at least that's the way it happened for me. I do think that it was a little bit of maturity, and then also just failings along the way. That's where you learn, right?
Mm. Oh my goodness, man. You're talking my language now. Failing. Oh my gosh, I've failed my whole career. But yes, I've gotten better because I've failed. And I'm telling you stories today from those failures. But when you're going through that, it's not that fun, is it?
Oh, no, it's not. And you think it's like the end, it's like,
Yes.
oh, that's it. I'm ruined forever. I think tears too, like lots of tears, and just being frustrated because you have a certain intent and you feel like that's going to be good enough.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn. So and when you've just got difficult things to deal with, I think is also that you don't ask for, that you don't expect, is when you learn the most. And that's in life and at work. So in everything.
Oh man, you're 100%. Hey, let's talk leadership here. I know you lead a team. There's been so many changes over the last couple of years, with
Yeah.
obviously with COVID, and as we navigate through this new world of work. I always like to ask the question, just kind of kick it off. Like, if someone said, "Hey, Alex, how would you define leadership? How would you respond to that?" I know it's defined in so many different ways, but how would you define it?
I've read so many articles lately about the best leaders are the empathetic ones. And
Mm,
I never really thought about it like that. But I do think that it's true. I don't think that, or let me just say it like this. I've evolved how I think of leadership, because I used to think that the leader was the one that knew the most and that had all the answers.
mm,
And that is not true at all, because I definitely don't have all the answers on my team. And I have had team members on my team that have been promoted to leaders now, or they lead the team, they're team leads. And part of it was, part of the questions there were also like, hey, but how are my team members what are they going to think? I don't want them to think that, we were peers and now I'm over them. Like, how does that transition work? And so I said, remember that being a leader doesn't mean that you have all the answers. It
Mm.
just means that you get to work together to solve the problems. And you can learn things from each other. So I don't think of it like that anymore. And I used to think of it like that. So I wanted to always have all the answers, always know exactly how all the processes worked so I could have all the answers. And now I'm like, you know what? These are smart people. It's just surrounding yourself with smart people and listening to them and then kind of figuring it out together.
Okay, if you're listening to the podcast right now, you need to get out a pen and start taking some notes here. There's so much gold here. I love what you said. It means that you don't have to know all the answers. It means that you now get to work together. I love that. Hey, by the way, how does it feel when you get to see team members promoted that have worked for you? Doesn't it feel good?
It does. It's amazing. And I'm just so proud. It's like, it's like a mom thing. Like, I'm so proud, to see the growth with them and just to see the confidence of letting them, become that. Because for me, it was really easy to see right away. Like, they were just natural leaders, or they just had great insight, but they didn't necessarily think that they should go into managing people. So
Mm.
it was a process for them to discover that in themselves. And so it's just really great to see just see them flourish and just sit back and just watch them
I
lead
love that.
away.
Yeah, I love that because what you're saying, it reminds me of. So I just published my latest book called Life in the Leadership Lane to mirror the podcast, and one of the chapters is called "Mic Up with Belief." And I got that from watching, sports. You see them put the mics on the players, when they're out in the field, and you can hear them talking. I just think that's so cool because that's their real self.
Yes.
But what you have the opportunity to do as a leader is speak belief into people. Like you just said, hey, sometimes people they don't realize how good they are until you tell them, and then man, you are just like making impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us, at least for myself, I'm speaking for myself, when I always thought, you work hard and then your management is just going to know
Hmm.
that you need to be promoted and that you need to be lifted up, and they'll tell you what lane to go in. Oh, you need to go into management, or you should go more into this field. I just thought somebody else would know those answers and would put me there. And that's not true. Sometimes you have to speak up for yourself. Like, what do you want? And what do you want to do? And say, I want this. How can I get there? And talk to your mentors, talk to your management about what you want. But it's really great to be given the opportunity to tell other people also, you know what, you're really good at this, because sometimes people just don't realize it. They just do. They're just going forward and they don't realize that they are good in something. So always mentioning that, I think, is important to
I love
my
that.
peers. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually thinking about when I first started in relocation back in the mid 90s. I worked for a moving and storage company. And I was out of college, and my general manager, after I don't know, 6 months or so, he said, Bruce, I notice you're really good with people. So do you consider yourself more sales or more operations? And I didn't have self-awareness at the time. I didn't have people,
Mhm.
people telling me. And so I said, well, I'm a balance, I've got sales and operations. And so that he put me on an operations track. And then so I spent 8 years in operations. I led a couple of small organizations. But then when I joined Armstrong in 2004, I wanted to go on the sales and marketing side. And so I've been there for 18 years. And obviously the operations helped me, but because I wasn't self-aware, I didn't know what's track to be on. And so, people can really add incredible value when they see something in someone and can really lift them up, can't they?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
so. And the more you do it as a team, I feel like the more people are inspired to do that and see, like, what do I see in other people that they might not be aware of, and like share that. So I really love that about my team and my team meetings, is that everybody knows. And I keep telling them, I don't have the answers. So anybody else have feedback on this, or anybody else want to jump in on this? And that's where you see brilliance and
I
how
love it.
smart your people are. So
I love that. Oh my gosh, that is so good. Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of team meetings, last couple of years has been incredibly different. Now, do you work from home or do you work in the office? And how have you shifted your leadership in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been tough. I currently am at home, so this is
Mhm.
my home office.
Yeah.
We are still closed since March of 2020, but our offices open up December 1st, thankfully, because I love office life and just like the people and just feeling the energy. So I'll definitely be going back, but we are all going back at a flex capacity or hybrid capacity there. So yeah, it's been tough for me as an extrovert. So I've definitely had to shift kind of the way we work because we're very collaborative at Indeed and we had open seating. So it was very much all day just reaching over like, hey, so what do I do about this? Or what was this? All day long. And now it's not that easy, right? You have to set up a Zoom or you have to call someone. So we've just shifted into that space. So it's definitely been a transition.
I've talked to a couple different SHRM leaders, and we've talked about the, meetings on Zoom and meetings face to face, and one thing I mentioned was I said, yeah, but regardless if we're meeting on Zoom or face to face, the mission's still the same, right? We still got to do it. And he said, yeah, but you're missing the small moments. And I was like, oh man, that was really an epiphany for me because he was talking about what you just said, leaning over the cubicle and saying, hey, what do you, just that small talk, small conversation.
For sure.
It is so big, isn't it?
It is. It is so big. And just walking into a meeting like, oh, hey, your snack or your cup of coffee looks really good. That just sharing those personal moments, I think, is
Mm.
really important. And so we've had to find ways to do that and not make meetings all about, business, but just share things like, hey, I see something on your background, or I like your sweater, or, whatever it is, just to get a little bit closer. Because I think one good thing about working remotely is that we're kind of all been closer to see each other's lives.
Mm.
You see pets, you see kids running around, or you just whatever it is, you kind of get to see more of a glimpse of home, and you see somebody's home, when you go on camera. So it's a little bit, we've all gotten a little closer in that way, I feel like.
Hey, I'm curious. Did
Yeah.
some industries didn't really change a whole lot other than their global relocation? Did Indeed slow down or pause, or are you back up to normal? What's your mobility look like compared to prior COVID?
Right. Yes, we actually did. We stopped hiring. We did have a hiring freeze at the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we never had any layoffs or anything else. And our leadership is amazing. They always made it a priority to just, we want to make sure that everybody keeps their job. And we never had anybody laid off, which was terrific.
Mm.
And then with time we did start hiring again because business was actually booming
Mhm.
for us. So eventually we started hire again, and now it's pretty high up, just to levels for pre-COVID. Even for us, it's really really crazy right now for hiring and just jobs. And as you know, with the great resignation, but also the need for help and for jobs, there's a lot of opportunity right now. So we've been really blessed with all of that.
Hey, well, let me ask you this, and I'm curious about, do you think remote work, and number one, do you think remote work is here to stay? Because I know we talked a lot about it before COVID, but we couldn't figure out how to do it. And all of a sudden we figured out how to do it. But we also know the importance of being back together. I'm curious from you, your perspective, is remote work here to stay, number one? And number two, do you think that's going to impact mobility?
Yes, on both counts. Yes, I
Yes, yes.
definitely think it's here to stay, especially for industries and jobs that can be remote.
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be people who prefer to be remote, or at least have that flexibility of being able to go into the office whenever they want, or going into the office whenever they want. And then it also gives opportunities to people who live in small towns that might not be close to big industries and things like that. And it gives opportunities for that talent to be present and be a part of an organization that maybe they couldn't have done before, except if they were moving to a big city. So I think it is here to stay, and there's a lot of good things about it. I do think that we've got some more studying to do on data, because one of the big things that I'm concerned about is making sure that we keep diversity and inclusion for women in the workplace, because one of the biggest things that have come out of COVID is that a lot of women have either left the workforce or opted to work remotely. And so as we were talking about being present in the office, sometimes it's you're there and you just get exposure to leaders, you get exposure to opportunities. And we want to make sure that that is also available to people who choose to work remotely, because it might be easier on their household, or their single moms, or whatever it is that they decided to work remotely for. We want to make sure that we keep that in line.
So I think that is so good, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I know there's a lot of people listening. They're looking for those opportunities. In fact, during the conference, I was writing down quotes, and the one I wrote next to your name was, you said, "Hey, we need to look for opportunities," and it sounds like that's an opportunity you have been looking at. Any other opportunity? I'm curious, did you change policy at all? Or are you just like, hey, let's work through it, get more data, and when that opportunity comes up, we may look at changing? Did y'all do any policy change or anything like that?
Yes. So um, we did a relocation policy change after the whole hybrid workforce
Mhm.
started.
Yeah.
It definitely shifted for us in how we help people move and who we moved, as far as like what organizations in the company. We definitely did some of that, and we're still evolving. And one
Yeah.
one great thing about Indeed is that we're really quick to change. So if it doesn't work, try something else, and we're not afraid to try new things. So that's been really helpful. I think that we've been quick. But personally, I did jump on the opportunity for the hybrid workforce. When that happened, I just said, you know what, we're the ones that need to be in that table and talking to what the hybrid work policies are going to be about, and what they're going to include, and what they're going to ask as far as employees, right? Because we've been doing that forever. We've been
Mhm.
moving people. So if people think, oh, I was in the New York City office, but now this gives me the opportunity to move back home to Ohio, or whatever place that may be, what do we need to ask as far as compliance? What do we need to ask as far as immigration? How is that going to affect your taxes? Things that we're already familiar with. So I did jump on that opportunity and just raise my hand and said, hey, we're the experts in this field, whatever we can do to, again, add a value here. That was really important to me, just because of our exposure into this was already there. So
I love that, because a lot of people listening may not realize you're not just, I mean, moving. There's a lot. There's a lot. It can be very complex depending on a lot of different variables. But I was thinking, I just wrote down a few, like policy change, also policy management, your immigration, there's administration, there's comp, there's tax, benefits. You're just so involved. And so do you find yourself also working very closely with HR leaders or talent acquisition, or both?
absolutely, yes. We have actually a task force that has all those folks involved. So of course, everybody thinks of HR automatically, right? But in there, there's specialists for that, right? So we've got all our HRIS specialists. We've got that team in there. We've got our compensation team. We've got members of our talent acquisition team, right? How does this affect our hiring? What are we doing? What are we saying when we hire? Hey, you can be remote, but what does that mean, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you can be remote from another country for this particular job. We've got our global tax team in there as well. So a lot of folks working together, figuring out what does this mean for us. So yes, we were lucky enough to be admitted into that group, but we weren't automatically the first ones that
Hmm.
the company thought about, right? Everybody just thought HR should manage this.
Hmm.
But there's just a lot of things that they don't know, right? Because they're just not working in that space all the time like we are.
I'm glad you shared that. I had Marie Best to check on with McKesson a while back,
Mhm.
and she's so fantastic. And she was talking about I asked her about mobility, and is everybody aware of it? And she said, a lot of times people aren't even aware of mobility, and she was talking about the importance of pushing information to your entire group to let people know all of the value that mobility brings. Any thoughts on that? Have you found yourself needing to do that, or find yourself doing that often?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that's my full-time job is just education, right? Education and
Love
just
it.
saying like, have you thought of this? Because we don't know what we don't know,
Mm.
right? So leaders are not necessarily thinking. I can tell you that the first thought that goes into their minds, I feel like leaders and CEOs is, hey, we don't have to limit ourselves to hire in the city anymore. We can open up talent to anywhere. This work from anywhere
Hmm.
conversation, and of course that's great, and for opportunities, but we just have to make sure that we do it the right way, keeping with the laws and protecting our employees and making sure that they've got the correct benefits in the space that they're living in, and that we're reporting things to the tax entities correctly and things like that, it's our job to bring up and say, just make sure that we're covering ourselves and our employees on this front, and duty of care in that space. So that's our job, right? Just to inform and like bring that to the forefront, because people are not, they're just thinking of their space and their expertise, but they're not necessarily, it's like, what are you missing? So
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to what you said early in the program. You just got to continue to find ways to add value for the organization so you can achieve all the things you want to achieve,
absolutely.
all the goals, all the critical objectives and things like that. I love that. Hey, I want to ask you this question because you're a driven leader. What drives you, Alex?
I think it's just knowing that I am adding value and I feel productive. That
Mm.
definitely drives me every day, to know that, I can help someone have, an easier time moving, or an easier time and not having to deal with maybe IRS issues later
Yeah.
because they don't report something, just things like that. Knowing that I have the ability to do that, and that if maybe I wasn't there to point that out, there might that might not have been a point that would have been raised. Mhm.
No, that's so good. I absolutely love that. I admire everything you're doing and what you stand for. Hey, I want to ask you one last question before we shift into another area, and that is, there's some people listening. I know a lot of people in the HR community. They do some moving. They not do hundreds of moves, but they move people. And they may not actually have a program developed. Maybe they're trying to, put something together. Any tips you can give that might help someone listening that you think are important? I know one of the things that you do is you work with partners, and I'm always curious about like what's a good partnership look like. But give the audience maybe one or two tips that you might share with someone that is starting to move some people, and they want to just they want to put something together to better that experience.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things is that there's no perfect formula for,
Mm.
like, if you're coming up with a policy. I think it's, for example, if I got hired at a different company, I can't say, hey, here's what I bring with me and it's going to be perfect. I don't think that's the case. I think, one, you have to get to know exactly what your company stands for, what's their culture, how much do they want to spend, what's the problem they're trying to solve, and then create something that is fit for that organization. That's the first thing I would say. I don't think that it should be, one size fits all, because as we know, there's a whole lot of different types of policies out there.
Yeah.
And so you've got to make sure that it fits your employees. That's the first thing. And then second, I would say benchmark, either through your relocation management company, or there's just a lot of organizations like in ERC, you can do some benchmarking there and just see what other people are doing, because again, it's brilliant minds. So why not take the best of those ideas to find something useful for your organization?
Yeah. No, I love that. I love how you said find the problem that needs to be solved. Don't just find a problem. What's the one that needs to be solved, and get in alignment with that. And then, of course, benchmarking. I'm glad you said that Worldwide ERC, they also provide benchmarking. There's a lot of different areas you can, obviously, the
Yes.
local, the regional chambers or the regional ERC groups can help with that too. And so just absolutely appreciate you sharing all. Hey, I want to ask you this question. And this is when I have a guest on, I always like to pull out like, what's one thing that you do every day that helps keep you on track? Like are you an early morning riser, or is there something that you have in your daily agenda that just you do it every day?
I am not a morning person. I'm a night owl,
Okay.
actually. But I think one thing that I do every day is just kind of take a moment to myself and just to think through without, anybody else, talking to me or asking me anything. Just take time. And for me, in working from home, has been to just take walks and just get
Mm.
outside and just, see what's out there. Just disconnect. I think it's been really, really helpful. Because if not, you just keep going and going. There's always something to do, and you don't take time to think about that. It's very easy to do that.
I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are missing is that thinking time. It's so important. Funny you said that, because I know you're probably right there with me and lots of people. When we went to, everything shut down, we're just working. Like we are not drawing boundaries. We're just working. And then all of
Right.
a sudden, a month into it, we're like, oh my gosh, I am burnt. And we had to
Yes.
figure out that, you know what? We need to block time for ourselves.
Hmm. I think
And
that's exactly right. Because a lot of us, well, at least me also, I was like,
mhm.
there's nothing else to do. I might as well work. Right. So it was just all the
Yeah,
time working, working, working. And
yeah,
we were extremely productive, but it backfired. I feel like part of this great resignation is because of a lot of burnout,
yeah.
because we weren't setting boundaries. And it was like, well, there's no commute time. So I guess I just keep on working, and you don't realize the time. We worked more, I feel like, from home than we would have in the office. There's also none of those little breaks that we were talking about. They're like, hey, you want to grab a coffee, or you run into somebody going into the bathroom and just have a little conversation. You don't have those little breaks. So you have
Yeah.
to put them in for yourself, put them into your calendar. I do have my lunch blocked out. So at least I know I have an hour. Sometimes my day's full of meetings. So I definitely always try to take that time to do whatever I need to do. And sometimes it's not even lunch. Sometimes it's just, anything that I need to do, or just step outside, or, whatever it is. But yes, we definitely have to put that in, which is kind of insane that we have to remind ourselves to take a break.
I
So
think that's so important. And one thing that I've realized is that all of the leaders that are high performers like yourself, they all, regardless if they're early morning, late night, whatever, they have a system, right? They have a system, and they are very disciplined at that system, just like you're talking about thinking time, walking time, lunches, different things like that. It's so important. Hey, last question I want to ask you is around, you mentioned a couple of times the great resignation. And I had an HR leader on the podcast a few weeks ago, and she said, she looks at it more as the great reevaluation, that people aren't necessarily leaving, but they are reflecting on, is this what I want to do? Is this where I want to work? Is this where I want to live? What are your thoughts on the great resignation? I mean, is this here? Is this, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that completely. I think just being out of our typical space has given us the room to reevaluate, and just everything going on in the world, also reevaluate what's important to us? What is my personal value? What do I want to do with my life? Is this the right thing? Because I feel like it's not only with work,
Mhm.
people have been evaluating their life
Mm.
these almost 2 years. So you've just heard of a lot of big life changes that people have made as a result of this. I think that's good when we take some time, especially us and the culture in the United States. I feel like is very work driven. You just
Mm.
work hard and you work all the time and you're
Mm.
expected, or we put that expectation on ourselves to just be available all the time.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you don't realize, like, oh my gosh, 20 years have gone by. Is this really what I wanted? Is this not what I
Mm.
wanted? What's important to me? So I have seen a lot of cases where people have just quit their job and not necessarily had another job lined up, just to take some time with their family and figure out what they want to do, or say like, hey, this isn't exactly what I love, even though I'm good at it. I want to find my career and what I love to do, just things like that. So I think there's been a big shift in people just kind of evaluating their life, what they want to do, what the next steps are, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think so too. And here's another silver lining, and with all this great resignation, and that is you. And again, you said look for opportunities, and I think this is also an opportunity for us as leaders to make sure that we're listening to our people and that we're doing everything we can to help them be successful. So as they do reflect and they think about, they're like, you know what? I love what I do and I love the people I work with. And I just think there's a great opportunity there.
Absolutely, for sure. We definitely have to step back and make sure to start our meetings with, how exactly are
Yeah.
you doing?
Mm.
How are you feeling? What's your workload like?
Mm.
Because a lot of times we just feel like, oh, I guess this is all my work and I'm responsible for it. But if you don't set those boundaries for yourself, or say, you know what, this is too much, I need some help, sometimes your management or your leaders are not going to know that. And it's your job to set those boundaries. Nobody's going to do that for you. And that's something that I've also learned along the way. I just used to just, give me more, give me more. I can take on more. And I just never spoke up about, the help that I needed at the time. So I think that might be happening still. A lot of people just think that, again, that their leaders or their managers are going to know when enough is enough. And that's not true. It's different for everyone. So we should be, as leaders, we should be asking that question, and hopefully giving the space for somebody to feel comfortable to tell you that. I think
That's
that's really
fantastic.
important.
That is so good. That is so good. Hey, speaking of advice, you've given incredible advice on the show today. But I always like to ask this question, and that is, have you ever been given any advice as you were growing up? Maybe it was from a family member or a friend, or in the workplace. Have you ever been given some advice? It was just so good. You just always find yourself sharing that with others.
Yeah, I think it's been ask for what you want. Exactly. Because sometimes I think, especially as women, we also tend to feel uncomfortable asking for what we want. We don't want to feel like, oh, are we being too entitled? Are we being too confrontational? And things like that. So we just kind of say, like, oh, I want more responsibility, and keep it vague. But if you already know what you want, you should ask for that specifically and not be afraid to ask for it. And also show why you think you should get that. And
Mm.
if they don't believe that, then it's also, okay, tell me how I can get there, or what is it that I need to do to be able to achieve this. And I think it's definitely challenging. It's not always easy to do that, but I'm still working on that myself. But I think it's really important.
That's fantastic. That is so good, Alex. I appreciate it. I just wrote down ASK, put that on a sticky note, put that on your laptop, on your computer, whatever. And I'll be looking at that every day.
For
Don't be
sure, yeah.
afraid to ask, right?
Don't be
Oh,
afraid to ask. And if you can't get it there, sometimes it's time to move on, right? You just ask for what you want and say, is this something that you would be able to give me? Life is short, and if it's not with this company, then it's time to move on. And
yeah. And then
yeah.
sometimes also it might be, hey, you know what? It's just not the right moment. Like in my
Mhm.
season, maybe I need to go and learn a little bit more. I noticed that you took the GMS-T. not too long ago. And so you just got another certification. So maybe it's like, okay, well, maybe it's no, but you know what? I can take a certification or take some education. Okay, now let me do it again.
Right, right.
Oh
Yes,
my
and that's
gosh.
exactly what I was talking about, where you get that feedback of what am I missing? Is it the technical aspects? Is
Mm.
it working with other people? All of that feedback is going to help you get there, and hopefully you're surrounded by leaders or management that can give you that guidance of what exactly you need to be able to fill all the requirements that give you that.
Love it. Oh my gosh. I told you the time was going to fly. So we're
It
going to go
did.
ahead and shift in here to it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you just a few questions. First question, I like to ask this question because there's kind of a mix here. Would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
I do both, but there's nothing like a good book.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I love the smell of it. I tried Kindle, but it's not the same. I need like an actual book. So
Isn't it? Oh,
book
me
person.
too. Me too.
Yeah.
I've done Kindle. I've done a few books on Kindle, but I need that hardback or softback, a paperback cover. Hey,
Especially the good ones.
so
Yeah.
speaking of good ones, I'm just curious. Have you like read a book over the last year or two that you like find yourself referring or you just really enjoyed?
Yes, there's a couple that I'm just like, please, like telling everyone, you have to read this book. It will change your life. The last one that was like such a huge impact on me, I think, was a book called Untamed by
Mm.
Glennon Doyle. She's amazing. But that book was just so profound. And I read it during COVID, so that was really good. And the latest one I'm reading is kind of inappropriate, but just because of the title, but it's really good. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Beep.
Yes.
It's very, very good. Surprisingly, just because I thought the title was kind of funny, but it
Yes.
really is very good.
I will put that in the show notes. I've seen that before and I thought that was very interesting. I have not read it. That's,
Right, right. It's so interesting. You're just like
yeah.
curious about it, but it actually is extremely profound. And I
Mm.
found myself highlighting nonstop on some of those things. So it's just
That's
been a
when you
really
know
great
you
book.
have a good book. When you find
Yes,
yourself highlighting, underlining, you're folding the pages. Oh
yes,
my god, that's so
yes.
good. Hey, we this is actually playing in December and we've just finished Thanksgiving. We're going into the Christmas season. A great time to like be grateful. And I would love to ask you, like, what are you most grateful for, Alex?
I am just so grateful for my family and just having the opportunity to live where I live, and just seeing everything that's gone on in the world, and seeing people in other countries not having access to vaccines or to healthcare the way we've had. When we see what happened in Italy, what happened in India, it's just so heartbreaking, and it could have been any of us. So I'm just feel really, really grateful to be here and have access to all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so great. I really appreciate that. Hey, I've got two more questions. First question is, I'm just curious, other than mobility and working at Indeed, and being passionate about mobility, what energizes you? What do you do outside of work?
Hmm. What do I do? I love to be with people. So any opportunity that I get to just get out and, you know, hang out with friends and things like that. I actually last week went with some friends to do karaoke, and it was so fun.
Okay, I need to see the
There,
video.
no, there's no videos. There's no videos. Of course not. That was forbidden. But
Uh,
there was a couple of them that had never done that before, and so it was just really exciting to convince them. Like, come on, the
yeah.
worse you are, the better it is.
you
So
know,
yeah,
uh,
that's been really
it,
great.
so when you do stuff like that, though, you just connect at just a different level. And I just love that. Hey, I want to ask you this final question as we wrap up the show. My favorite question I like to ask, and that is Alex, 10 years older, is knocking at your front door, and you're going to go answer that door. What is she going to tell you?
Oh man, that's a toughie. Um, hopefully she'll say, you're doing good. You're
Mhm.
okay.
Mm.
So I think a lot of times we worry about like, am I going the right path? Am I making the right decisions? And I feel like everybody has to go through their own journey,
Mhm.
whatever that is. So whatever decisions you make, they're never going to be wrong because that's just what you had to learn, right, in your journey. So hopefully that older me is going to say, you did good, kid.
I
No
love
regrets, no
that.
regrets, right? Because I feel like sometimes I have regrets about my past and just the way that, oh, I should have taken more advantage of this or done that. But
Yeah.
that's not exactly the right way to look at it. Everybody just has their journey and just their different things that they have to learn,
Yeah.
that the next person might not. They might already have mastered that, and so they don't have to go through that.
Hey, I appreciate you sharing that because there are some people that are listening right now that needed to hear that because you're right. Early in our careers, we're looking back a lot of times and sometimes it prevents us from moving forward with that confidence. And so I'm glad you shared that. We've all been in those situations, and man, you are definitely driving in the leadership lane. If somebody
Appreciate
heard
that.
something on this podcast and wanted to learn more and wanted to connect with you, how would be the best way they could connect, Alex?
I'm definitely on LinkedIn, so they can find me there. And I do like to be on there and participate on there. So that's a good way to reach out to me, and always available for anybody in mobility who wants to talk mobility. I'm a mobility nerd, so always happy to talk through that.
I love how it said on your LinkedIn, it said things I like to talk about. And it said like mobility, global mobility, HR. You had those things listed. And I was like, that is a great idea. If somebody wants to talk about that and collaborate with someone on that, that is really, really good. Hey, listen, I want to just say thank you for just investing a few minutes to come onto the show. I'm confident some of the things you shared today is going to help a lot of people. And for that, I say thank you. And I just wish you the best. Have a wonderful Christmas holiday and best wishes in the new year, my friend.
Thank you so much, Bruce. It's been really fun to talk to you and um, just to be here. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.